Hello, BSmart viewers. Welcome back to another engaging episode of Manager's Mantra, where we connect with industry leaders who are shaping the future of business management. Today, we have with us Manisha Arora, data science lead at Google. She specializes in machine learning, experimentation, and data driven decision making. She has more than 12 years of experience in working at the intersection of data, measurement, and business strategy. She has been helping organizations apply AI and analytics to solve complex problems at scale. So, without waiting further, let's jump right into this insightful discussion. Hi, Manisha. A very good evening from India. We are really very thankful to you for participating in this video session. And, I am sure this will be a great experience for the viewers there.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Abhishek, for having me. It is such an honor to be here. So really appreciate all the time that you put into doing this.
Sure. Without just skipping you wait, we will straight away start discussing the different points we have today with us. Uh, the first question that I wanted to ask you is, how has data science evolved over the past decade, and how is it crucial, how is it important on management decisions? How will it impact management decisions, or how has it impacted the management decisions already?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question because data science has gone through, like a pretty transformative journey, like at least in the past 12, 13 years, so that I have been aware of. So when I started with data science, I think it was mostly like a ton of reporting that a lot of companies were doing. So it was, mostly about so it was mostly about telling what happened, right? So preparing a lot of dashboards. So it was a lot of capturing historical trends. So whatever has happened in the past, right? But then slowly data science started moving into more predictive, right? What will happen in the future, right? So it would basically tell you what can happen, who are the customers we can target. So it started to get more proactive in terms of forecasting demand, in terms of, let's say, managing inventory. So then also like personalizing the experience of the users, right? So many use cases evolved when we moved from more of a descriptive analytics to more of a predictive analytics. So that was one major shift that I saw. The second major shift that I've seen in data science, is basically movement towards causal, right? So not just telling, what's going on, but also telling why something has happened, right? So that is why now we see data science is basically so just embedded into different kind of decision making systems, right? Like, and it's increasingly influencing those decisions in real time. So that's where data science is right now. So to your second question that you asked, how has that impacted like management decisions, right? So I think previously, when data science, was still evolving and, still in its very nascent stages, data science didn't have a seat at the table. So it was more of a support function. But now we see that companies are increasingly that companies are increasingly relying on data, like in experimentation methods, like to understand what is going on, who we can target. So they are helping. Data science is actually helping build strategies to scale the products, also to drive the product growth. So that is why data science is no longer a support function, but it is like a core, it's a core strategic capability in most of the organizations now. So most of the management that understands this, like, and enables and empowers this are the companies that are basically leading so this transformative journey.
Thank you, Manisha. Um, you know, you have been helping advertisers of large companies in predicting the performance of ads through machine learning, through AI. Now, for the young advertisers, for the young advertising enthusiasts, can you please suggest how do they use AI or ML to maximize the reach and impact of ads?
Um, so yeah, like I would say that machine learning and AI. So these are basically transforming the advertising space, right? Like, and they are moving from more, let's say, like broad targeting that was done in the past to now something that's more precise, it's more accurate, like, and it's more driven by the content, by the type of user. So it's much more personalized as before, right? So for the young advertising like professionals, like I would say that the biggest opportunity like is in terms of thinking about advertising, like in terms of a data driven in terms of a data driven optimization problem in a way, right? So you are trying to match the right product to the right audiences, like at the right time through the right kind of content, right? So that actually becomes an optimization problem to solve for. So that is why machine learning can help predict which audiences are most likely to convert, what is the best time to show an ad, how personalized the content needs to be based on what signals of the user behavior, right? And that is why one of the key mindsets here like is to combine the creativity like in building the ads with data, right? Like, and with data, I mean machine learning models and experimentation models, right? So for the young, because specifically mentioned about the young like advertising enthusiasts, um first is to develop a very strong intuition of data, right? Like which campaigns to run, how can that impact the user, how will they resonate with the users. So gather data around that and build a strong intuition around the data. Second is to learn with, to learn the different kind of, let's say, machine learning based bidding algorithms that happen behind the scenes, because ads is also like a pretty complex ecosystem. You have like an inventory of, thousands of ads, which connects to, like thousands of users. All of this is happening in real time, like, and there are also budgets that we have to meet. So just learn the ML based bidding algorithms that happen behind the scenes that power this entire system, right? And the third is that you keep people like, and users at the center of it, because while a lot of it is being done by machine learning and AI, we still have to understand that the end users are people, right? So that is why I keep that human story in mind as well.
Thank you. That was really insightful. So, my next question to you is, how does a company like Google find the balance between using customer data for personalization and at the same time ensure compliance with the increased regulations on the data collection practices today? And what can young leaders leading data-driven companies probably learn from this?
So no, so there are two parts to this question, if I understand this right. So first was, how do large companies, balance the personalization, which requires a lot of data, with the data regulation practices in place in the industry, right? And second part was, what can people learn from this, right? So while I cannot, while I cannot speak a lot about the things that I personally work on, or the the kind of engagements which I lead, but I can talk about in general how like most large companies navigate this, because they do rely on a ton of data. So so I would say first it's a balance, because you want your experiences to be more personalized, which requires more data, right? But at the same time, you also have to protect the privacy of the users, right? Like, and the companies that are best navigating this do treat privacy as, let's say, not just a compliance checkbox, but something that is, something that's essential, something that's a design principle, that's a part of their product strategy itself, right? So it's not just something that you have to check mark for the sake of it, right? Like for the sake of meeting some compliance, and regulations. So privacy, like, is increasingly becoming, like a core part of the product strategy as well. So having said that, there are some, privacy first data practices that I would say have evolved in the past couple of years. Um, so one that would mean that we basically just minimize the data that we collect from the user. So just collect what you need essentially, and second is that there are techniques such as like aggregating the data, like anonymizing data. Sometimes when I receive data, like, or I look into the databases we work with, we don't have a lot of user data in there that's already masked, right? So there are other teams that are working on masking that data before we can run any sort of analysis on that. So that's second. So you use techniques such as like aggregating the data, maybe at a geography level or maybe like at a segment level, and not go into the individual user level, right? Like, and then also anonymize and mask that data. The third is also, just be transparent about how we are using the user data, right? So be transparent with the users about their data. And then, like, also maybe give people some control, like, and we have seen that like in a lot of the applications where you can accept the cookies, reject the cookies. We have also seen on certain websites where you have controls over what data the company is collecting about you and how can they use that data, right? So these are all, I would say, like privacy first data practices that have evolved in the past couple of years, and they will continue to evolve more. So now the second question that you asked me was, what can we learn from this, right? So one of the key lesson is that user trust, like, is, like, I would say, a competitive advantage, right? So so companies that are transparent about their data practices, for example, what data we are collecting, what we are using it for, like, and for how long we'll retain that data, they build strong user trust, right? And that goes a long way. So responsible data practices, like, are no longer, like I mentioned, no longer a compliance requirement. So they are a core part of the strategy, right? And that is why the user trust and privacy are now becoming a competitive advantage. So I think one of the lessons for the young leaders to learn is that you don't treat privacy as something that you only need to check mark because of the regulations in place. They are there for a reason, like, and they have to be respected. And you have to design your data and product strategies like keeping those privacy first principles in mind. So let me know if this makes sense or if you have any further questions.
No, of course, it does. It does make a lot of sense, Manisha. Thank you. Um, today no discussions are complete without discussing AI. But
Mhm.
then, with the rising focus in AI, there has been a lot of confusion. It leaves young leaders with a confusion with how you decide that, which business tasks should be fully automated, and then which business tasks need a kind of human intervention. So how do you tackle that? How do you decide that? And the second question is, with AI raising ethical and societal questions, how should young leaders build responsible and transparent practices around AI?
Yeah, there is no data discussion that's complete without mentioning AI. Like, I know that the industry is going through through a transformation right now with AI. So to answer your first question, which tasks can be fully automated and which ones need human interventions, I think that the way I like to look at it is wherever you see repeatable patterns, like, I think that's a good use case for automation, right? So automation works best when there's high volume and when there are repeatable decisions to be made based on the historical data patterns, and we continue to expect to receive the data in the same way that we did previously, right? So it's something that you would expect to continue happening. So anything that's high volume, repeatable decisions is how I look at automation, is something that can work really well there. In terms of human intervention, um, yeah, I would say that for any kind of decisions which are not super certain, right, which require more judgment, right, and then anything that's high risk or anything that can have a significant impact on the business, right? Like, or even something that can have, let's say, some kind of ethical implications, right? So all of these are use cases which require human judgment, right? So anything that's more predictable, more repeatable, more high volume can be automated, but anything that's high risk, more uncertainty, like something that requires something that can have some kind of ethical implications. Those are all good use cases for human judgment, right? So for example, sensitive content, right? Or like anything which has like a lot of like privacy implications. So those are all good use cases, I would say, for having a human in the loop, right? Now, one thing I want to specifically mention there is when a lot of people look at it, they look at it as two independent systems, one that is automated and something that humans are involved. But I like to look at it like, as two systems working in a coordinated fashion, right? So the ultimate goal is not to replace humans with AI. The goal is to build systems where actually AI can help human decision making, right? Like while still, maintaining transparency and fairness and all of that. So that is why like I like to see these two working in conjunction together, right? Like, and the more automations you put in place, now there are more systems to manage also, right? And that also requires like a human in the loop sometimes. So the final decisions in a lot of cases, they are still being made by humans. And I think that like in cases where there is some certain where there is uncertainty and risk, those would continue to be made by humans, right? Like, and then the AI is gonna like focus on more of the automations and repeatable processes and decisions.
Manisha, today when we talk about data science, it is considered to be too much technical, and with management students, uh, it is like they see it as a not that necessary kind of thing for management students. So, do you think that MBA colleges are lacking data science courses, and there is a misconception that data science is too technical? And if you want to integrate some of the platforms, what would they be that you would like to see in MBA curriculum in today's colleges?
Yeah, so first I would begin by saying that yes, data science is a technical domain, right? But I don't think that like because you are specifically about the MBA and the management folks, they don't need to be a data scientist, right? Like they are the management, like, or they can have like other roles like in the company. They don't need to be a data scientist, but what they need to understand is how to take those insights and translate it to the business. So that's a very, very important skill, right? Like, and then they also need to understand probably how the models are working behind the scenes, like what are the right questions to ask, how long things will take to get done. They don't necessarily need to know how certain algorithms like are working, or they don't need to write the equations for it, but they need to understand at a high level in simple terms what that model or what that system does, right? And that is something that I think MBA courses have already started integrating, right? Like, and we'll see more of that integration. So we have seen that many MBA programs, while I myself am not an MBA, so but then this is just based on my understanding here. When I look at MBA programs, I see that a lot of them have already started incorporating some data science and analytics courses. But I would say that they're still catching up because traditional MBAs, in a way, were focused on, let's say, finance and consulting and all of that, right? But that is that's a valuable skill to have. That is certainly something that is extremely helpful. But at the same time, the world is now like evolving and becoming more complex as well. So that is why they sometimes prove to be not sufficient in a world where every strategic or every product decision has a data component to it, right? And so that is why this gap is something that most like MBA programs would need to address. So like I said, the MBAs don't need to become a data scientist, but they do need to have data fluency and data literacy, right? Now, how we can close this gap, and the question that you asked me about, how can MBA curriculums just incorporate more of this, right? First thing that I like to think about is more hands-on projects, right? Something that's more industry specific rather than something that's just good from, from a theoretical perspective. Right. And second, would actually be decision making with data. So teaching your learners and your students how to frame the right business problem. What data do you need for it? How do you interpret the model outputs? How do you collaborate effectively with your technical teams? Because most of my understanding is that when most MBA like graduates would would start their professional journeys, they would be working with either a data scientist or an engineer, or maybe a research scientist at some point, right? So just knowing how to collaborate effectively with technical teams is also a skill to have. So that's why I mentioned that practical understanding of the industry, of how to frame business problems, what problems can be solved with data, what kind of data you would need, how to interpret results, that is something that becomes a very, very valuable skill for people to have, right? And they don't need to know the exact algorithms, but they just need to know what problems we can solve with this and how can that help drive the business growth further.
Uh, Thank you, Manisha. You know, the viewers probably watching this would seriously they would like to know that what are the some of the lucrative career options for MBAs in this field, and what are the kind of challenges they can face here.
Right. So lucrative career options, I think there are plenty. So they have a lot of exciting career paths. Like they can, one of the most common roles I think MBAs continue to take up is like finance and consulting, right? But now there's also like product management, which is actually something that MBAs prefer a lot. That is being integrated with AI. So there's a new domain, the AI PM, that has evolved and it still continues to evolve a lot. They can also have, they can also, take up leadership positions for let's say more strategy based roles or analytics based roles. So there's like a plethora of options there. And what are the challenges? Now, for the challenges, yeah, one of the things which I mentioned is that, translating those technical insights, because I mentioned data science is a technical domain. So you have to be able to translate that technical complexity into business impact, because at the end of the day your OKRs are driven by how much impact you can drive for the company or for your org or for your team, right? So you have to take those insights which are being derived from all these data science models in place and convert them into business impact. So that's one of the major skill to have. Also, I think that if most people have to gain the respect of working effectively and working collaboratively with technical teams, then data literacy and data fluency is something that's really important. So you should know how to ask the right questions and how to frame the problems so that your data science teams can actually continue working on those problems. Also, I like to say that building the data science model is sometimes like an easier step of the entire problem ecosystem, right? So sometimes the difficult parts of framing the problem itself that can get very, very complicated sometimes. What do you want to solve for exactly? Why do you want to solve for it, and why do you want to solve for it now? What are the kind of problems which you want to prioritize, right? And all of these things are something that the MBA learners can actually develop and build. The other challenge, because you specifically asked about some of the major challenges for them. The other challenge, which I think that every one of us faces at this point, is the pace, because the domain is evolving so rapidly, and so quickly that continuous learning is not optional at this point. It's a part of the job, right? And that is why the people who stay curious and people who like to keep building their skills, those are the ones that will actually pull ahead of others successfully. So just like summarizing, because I mentioned a couple different points. So first is data literacy and fluency. Second, learning to work effectively with your technical teams. And third, like always being curious and continue to work on your skill development.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manisha. Let us talk about the future of data science a bit. What emerging trends do you think will shape data science in the next 3 to 5 years? And for an MBA looking to lead data science teams, what are the must-have skills needed to effectively partner with data scientists and with engineers?
uh, yeah, so um, 3 to 5 years, I feel is a pretty long time at this point, just given how quickly the domain is evolving. So I like to think of maybe like the next year, like 1 to 2 years maximum, to be probably a more reasonable time frame to look at. So I would say that the pace of work has really accelerated in the last, couple of years. But then the trends which I'm seeing shaping up right now, like, and will probably continue to shape up in the next year or so, is first, I think a lot of like generative AI use cases, which we're seeing, right? So there's a rapid increase of AI powered automations, workflows. We see vibe coding. We see a lot of like, vibe hackathons being conducted. People are building those kind of workflows, right? So I feel that generative AI is something that is going to become much more popular, like, and it's going to evolve beyond just, conversational chatbots. Like, I think it's going to be integrated as a part of your everyday workflows. Second, I think the importance of data infrastructure, because with more models, like these models are just like working on the data that's behind the scenes, right? So you need to have good data infrastructure in place to be able to build good models, right? And I think that there will be, like a focus on data infrastructure and real-time decision systems that can operate within the products. The third, like I would say, is responsible AI. I think we touched upon that a little bit. Responsible AI governance and privacy, right? Like, and I feel that the regulators and the consumers, they are both heading towards they're both heading towards greater transparency in the AI systems. So that's another trend which I see that it's going to shape up more. Now, for MBAs who want to lead teams, um, first I would say, yeah, data literacy is probably the first one, because if you have to really command a lot of respect from your technical teams, you should have, some background or some skills in data, right, to be able to work with your data scientists. And similarly, like if you're working with engineers, like, basic engineering principles. So I would say data literacy is first. Second is, I would say, like a mindset of experimentation, because with data science teams, these do rely like on a lot of experimentation and observational causal methods, right? Like, and it's basically a mindset to be able to test and measure the products that are out there in the market for, for your company or your team. The third is also cross-functional collaborations, because most organizations right now are working in a very collaborative structure. So none of the teams are working in silos right now. So that is why you would have to collaborate with your research team, with your design team, with your marketing team, or whoever your closest stakeholders are. So this is what I would say is the third important skill, is learning to work cross-functionally across all these different kind of stakeholders, ranging from some teams that are super technical to some teams that are super like business, business heavy. So now most of the leaders don't need to know how to build a model themselves. They just need to understand how models work, right? Like, and how do you evaluate the impact of those models? How do you align the technical work with the larger like business strategy? Like, and how do you translate that into impact metrics and stuff? So I feel that people and especially leaders who will be successful in this era will be the ones who can actually bridge the technology, like along with data, like along with effective business decisions for the org.
So with that question, we come to the end of the session. It was a great session. Thank you
Yes.
once again from our side, Manisha. And, I'm sure that this will be a great learning experience for the viewers and they will just love this session. And we hope to stay in contact with you and have you again in for any of our future sessions. Thank you so much.
So yeah, thank you so much, Abhishek, for having me. It was a pleasure having this discussion with you. Like, and I think those questions were also like super thoughtful from your side. So I'm sure that uh, uh, so that the audience will find value, like in understanding how the data science space is evolving and how they can continue to keep pace with it.
That's a wrap on this episode of Manager's Mantra. Thank you, Manisha, for sharing your insights on data science, data driven decision making, and providing career suggestions for the management students. BSmart viewers, we hope you found this conversation helpful. Share your thoughts with us at bsmart.edit@bsml.in. Follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram for more such insightful and inspiring content. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing.